Chapter 14. The Great Saku Tree. Months passed. Tuesday, October 6, 2005. The boys were in the classroom one morning like any other. That day, the entire school was under a blanket of fog. It had dawned with a rainy day. After a few hours, the rain had stopped and the first rays of the sun began to come out. While in the classroom, they receive a statement from the director saying the following. Good morning, student community. I am making this statement to inform you about Professor Freddie Carter and Professor Henry Hawking no longer working at the school. Since they have received a better job offer at the great campus for scientific research work, that is why that the school has decided to recruit the 4 Inquisitor sisters, Gretel, Janet, Firma and Vibera, excellent professionals in education hand in hand with the disciplines, and of course, also in the spiritual. I do not take any more time from their classes, I'm leaving. Happy day. Mary Cross, Angelica and Mariah mentioned to the boys about one of them. Guys. A few months ago one of these so-called sisters appeared in the Green Forest when we had a duel against the Scarlet Eagles, said Angelica. Really? Asked Black. Yes. She was an obese woman, said Mary Cross. Do you remember the silhouettes of women we saw at the door on the first day of school? Could it have been them? Asked Alvord. I do remember it perfectly, added Leanne. One of the ones you mentioned had those characteristics, said Samantha. At that, she entered the room running and worried. Teffa Gibson, guys. Guys. Teffa shouted. What's wrong? Gavin asked. It's Lewis, he disappeared. Teffa said. What? How? Black asked strangely. At the Great Saku Tree. We were talking about an Aztec Zahotacol rune that he had. He was helping me translate it for my history homework, when suddenly, we looked at a green fruit near where we were. Lewis reached out to touch him and he disappeared, Teffa explained. Let's go investigate. Gavin said. Adrian, Daniel, Roger, Gavin, Alvord, Mariah, Angelica and Mary Cross headed towards the Green Forest to reach the Great Saku Tree. Once there, Gavin said the following. Investigate the ground and surroundings. If you see a fruit, don't forget to report it. Teffa mentioned that the fruit is dark brown, its pulp is green with a large seed. The 8 boys began to look around the tree for some clue about the fruit. But they found nothing. Nothing, there are no traces, said Black. The tree looks like it doesn't have any crops, said Roger. How strange, how that happens to a guy who is a magician. Disappearing like that out of nowhere. Ha ha ha, said Adrian as he laughed. It could be thanks to you know what, Black added. Mary Cross knew that Daniel Black was referring to the prophecy. Only she had not yet told them, nor the others. Girls. Minutes passed and just then, a lady appeared among the bushes, a short lady, dressed completely in moss green, loose blonde hair, light blue eyes, a small face and a low voice. Good morning, young people. What brings you here? Everyone looked at the lady, but none responded to her greeting. What terrible manners, it's rude not to say hello, said the lady as she raised one of the fingers of her hand. Guys, be careful. He's going to put a spell on us. Mary Cross shouted, but it was too late. Mary Cross tried to take out his staff, use reflect and create a protective barrier. But everyone began to levitate and their sizes began to reduce. A white light shone throughout the garden of the Great Saku Tree and everyone lost consciousness. Minutes later Gavin woke up. Around him were his colleagues on the floor also unconscious, so one by one started calling them to wake them up. When everyone woke up, they noticed that something was not right. Something was wrong in the surroundings. The lady had shrunk them to the size of an ant, the grass was taller than them, the leaves were gigantic. The Great Saku Tree looked twice as tall and in the distance, they began to hear footsteps. It trembled a little, they looked. An ant passed by and they noticed that it was larger than their size. Damn, what happened? Black asked. I think he reduced us to the size of an insect with evil minimization magic, said Angelica. Now we're in trouble, Gavin mentioned. Everyone calmed down and began to think about how they could get out of there and reverse the spell. Marycross told them that the only way was to defeat the person who had cast a spell on them. Minutes later they observed a small path made by a caterpillar or worm that went towards the great Saku tree. Look at that path, it seems like a worm or snake made it, said Roger. Let's follow that path, Angelica shouted. The 8 boys began to walk along the path. Around them they appreciated the taller grass than their sizes. In the distance an ant climbing a blade of grass, blades of grass carrying drops of water after the morning rain. Some dry leaves on the ground formed small ponds with the rainwater that remained on them. Minutes later as they walked and approached the tree, different types of creatures were trying to attack them, such as snakes, iguanas with spikes on their tails and crests, spiders, queen ants, hornets, millipedes, black beetles. The mushrooms had come to life and, be careful, these creatures, being our size, have become dangerous. Black said. What are those things? Mariah asked and pointed to a small cave near the roots of the great Saku tree, and they look like little men. Little ones, with sky blue and white hoodies, brown hats and beards, were approaching. They're pixies, Gavin shouted. Pixies? Adrian asked. They're quite aggressive. Because of their small size it's hard to see them. They're not very strong. But they have such powerful magical powers that they can make people disappear from their lives. A place and send them to another place or dimension, mentioned Roger. A group of 7 pixies cornered them and began to attack them, but thanks to the magicians of Mariah and Marycross, creating protective shields, the spells of the pixies could not affect them. They were quickly eliminated by the group of boys. After finishing off the pixies, and near the roots of the great Saku tree, a mysterious voice spoke to them. If you want to return to normal and rescue your friend, we will wait for you inside the tree. Everyone ran and entered the great Saku tree. Once inside the place was dark. The bark of the tree looked like a cave. The only lighting in the place were small mushrooms on the walls, which illuminated with a green neon light. And fluorescent blue. What are those luminous mushrooms? Asked Mariah. When the great Saku tree was destroyed by the storm a few years ago, these fungi, the mycelia, expanded underground, creating a network of connection between all the nearby plant species, allowing them not only to communicate, but also to take care of themselves, protect, feed and supply themselves in water. When a tree in the forest is cut down, this mycelium communicates to all the trees in the green forest. If one of them is dying and all the other trees through the mycelium begin to take care of the remaining trunk to try to save that life, then they feed it with water and protect it. Because that dying trunk is part of the forest family, explained Roger. After a few minutes of climbing the paths, which seemed to have been built by the animals and creatures that lived inside the great Saku tree such as ants, millipedes, spiders and worms. When they reached a platform, there were 2 paths, so the boys talked and divided up. Mariah, Daniel, Angelica and Roger took the first path, while Gavin, Adrian, Marycross and Alvord took the second path. The first group ascended the path, getting rid of enemies such as spiders, ants and more pixies, until they reached a dead end. Since a wall of bark did not allow them to advance, but looking up, they noticed how a smell of honey began to aromatize the place. Above them there was a beehive. Suddenly someone spoke to them from behind. But what do we have here? 4 badly behaved children, mentioned a lady with curly hair, short, with glasses, teeth yellow from tartar, a dress baggy red, wide hips, rear and a voluminous belly. Who are you? Where is Louis? Roger shouted. The lady began to laugh in an evil way. Ha ha ha. He's not here. I think Gretel will take care of his other friends, and I'll take care of you. I'm Janet, first inquisitor of the four sisters. Who are you? Why are you here? Asked Daniel Black. Janet approached Daniel, and touched his nose, cheeks and stroked his hair as if he were a dog. In a sarcastic way she said, ha ha ha. Dear. Our task is to finish you off. Janet turned back and positioned herself, raising her hand. The four of them were aware of the movement of her hand, since they had seen the other sisters use evil magic with their hand. Janet lowered her hand and placed it on her right leg. She squatted down and did a sumo pose. She placed her hands together and her body began to shake. Her legs began to shrink and her hips and rear began to become in a caterpillar body, black in color. A beauty like thorns came out of the caterpillar's skin. Janet had transformed into a creature, half human, half caterpillar. Her appearance was the same. Her eyes turned yellow and red. Her torso became a red shell, and below her torso, the rest of her body. It was a caterpillar. The duel began. Mariah, Daniel, Angelica and Roger were preparing for the duel. Janet attacked first. She raised her hands and from the sky, a couple of pixies fell through cobwebs like ropes. Followed by this, Janet looked huge. Supporting the part of her body caterpillar rose like a tower. Mariah used reflect for protection, while Daniel quickly took out the goblins with two burr shots that were quite effective. The tail of Janet's caterpillar had a kind of mouth, that was her weakness. So the boys managed to aim her attack at that target. Through that mouth, Janet released a curtain of black smoke from Smotoxarga, which triggered the entire group to have a state of frenzy. Blindness, poisoning and the boys began to cough. Janet's attack had broken the barrier that Mariah had created. Roger quickly took out an antidote from his bag and gave it to Mariah. With that, Mariah used Statuna's ability, causing the group members to be cured of the state they were in. The Smotoxarga dissipated and again Janet tried to hit the four with the tail of her caterpillar body, looking for a way for them to fall into the void from the road where the duel was taking place, but fortunately they managed to dodge it. After this, Mariah used her special attack called the Jazz of the Apocalypse. A wave of Windaga mixed with Electra hit Janet, unbalancing her, causing her to lose her balance and fall. Her caterpillar tail was weak. She squirmed to get back up, but his weight and the impact did not allow it, but he continued attacking from a position like the lying Buddha. Angelica used a special attack called Katana Slash and split Janet's body in two. However, she continued moving and attacking. Her torso and head no longer had as much power, but her caterpillar limb continued attacking. Roger launched a beam of Electra and paralyzed both parts of Janet, and Black used his special attack called Flamethrower with his shotgun. Janet went up in flames, her caterpillar part disintegrating and her human part as well, screaming in pain from the defeat. The first group had won the duel. After the duel and recovering with potions, the tree cavern began to shake, opening a new passageway, where the boys climbed up and entered the hive. A small squirrel on top of the hive watched them and murmured, "I hope they are winners." The second group, which included Gavin, Alvord, Adrian and Marycross, had climbed several segments into the tree until they came across Louis, who was unconscious in a cocoon attached to a spider web. "Look! There's Louis!" Gavin shouted as he pointed to the roof of the place. "How are we going to rescue him?" Marycross asked. "I have a plan," Alvord said, and took his whip and threw it at the cocoon where Louis was. Like he attempted to grab it and bring it down, but where Alvord threw his whip, something blocked his lash. "What was that?" Alvord asked, surprised when he saw that the harpoon of his whip was returned, and another malevolent voice could be heard in the place. "No, dear. I'm afraid I won't let them take your friends so easily. Marycross was surprised to see that this was the lady she saw in the Green Forest when she faced the Scarlet Eagles. I am Gretel, second Inquisitor's sister, answered the tall lady. A little obese, with light skin, blonde hair in the shape of a bun, wide hips and a voluminous rear in a loose terracotta-colored dress. Gretel raised her hands up. A spider web began to lift her. When she was on top of them, her thick legs began to tremble, transforming from 2 legs to 8 legs. Half of her body had become a spider, while her torso and head were still in human form. From above, her spider rear began to launch eggs that hatched into sprites and more arachnids. And finally Gretel prostrated herself on her spider web to fight. The second duel began. Gavin, Adrian, Marycross and Alvord got ready to duel. The pixies and spiders began to attack, but were quickly exterminated by the explosive abilities of Adrian's ring. Gretel threw spider webs and smotoxarga and nullaga bombs where the eggs hatched, causing Marycross and Gavin to lose their turn. Alvord countered with his whip, hitting her tail, which was her weak point. Gretel swung, throwing spider webs down the walls to land with her 8 legs on top of the boys. Then Marycross and Gavin took her turns. So Marycross used Reflect as protection from Nullaga and Smotoxarga's attacks. Gretel created a spider web shield with her tail in front of her. Gavin threw her boomerang, causing it to hit Gretel by her tail when it returned, since behind her she had no shield, and Adrian threw Burna fire at the shield, setting it on fire and destroying it. Gretel was furious when she saw that she was losing the duel. She performed her most powerful attack. From her tail she took out a green egg, and threw it at the boys. It was the dark magic Ultima, creating a mass explosion, and leaving the boys in a state of frenzy and poisoning. So Marycross managed and used his special attack called Wisdom and sent Statuna to the entire group. They managed to recover. After this, Gretel was distracted as she hurt herself from her explosion, so Gavin and Adrian threw ice with Frieza with his ring and boomerang respectively, causing Gretel to become covered in ice, falling and breaking into 1,000 pieces. They had finished her off. The duel had ended with victory for the second group. After the duel, a gate in the bark opened and they advanced to the hive that could be seen at the top. After advancing for a few meters, the paths met again in the hive, and inside it, the boys were together again. In the hive was Lewis's cocoon. The cobweb was dissipating, leaving him completely free, so Mariah and Marycross with their light magic, used Health, managed to recover him and make him come to. Lewis, are you okay? Gavin asked. Lewis opened his eyes and saw everyone. Where am I? He asked as he woke up. Lewis recovered and everyone told him what had happened. Once ready, they continued advancing on the great Saku tree in the hive sector, with golden walls, the aroma of honey. And from the walls golden drops of honey slowly fell like fluids. Roger and Adrian took some. It was an important compound for creating potions and elixirs. A while passed, and everyone was wondering when the miniaturization spell would end, since they had defeated the 2 Inquisitor sisters. So they moved along the corridors and looked for clues in the hexagonal cubicles of the hive. When they reached the last segment, they were at the top of the hive. There was a dark room and a green sphere illuminated the hexagonal room. Look at that, said Alvord. It's the green orb, cried Adrian. Excellent. It was worth coming here, said Black. Roger ran to the place, took the sphere, and on it there was a note in a rune. So Roger showed it to Lewis, since he could read runes, and it said the following. If you are reading this, I hope it is useful to you. The blue orb is in the Mountain of Death in the hands of Vibera and Firma. It is a clue for all those who fight against the Witch of Wymeg, when the prophecy returns. Be very careful. By touching the lamp at the end of the room they will return to their normal size. May luck be with you. Crystal, Wendy and Bieberly. Crystal, Wendy and Bieberly? What does that mean? Gavin asked. It seems like someone came here, left a note for all those who visited this place, read and knew where to go, Lewis said. In this part it seems to mention the name of the witch. But it seems that time and the humidity of the place deteriorated the letters and words, Alvord commented while trying to decipher the message. It's the prophecy, said Mary Cross with a low tone of voice. Adrian, Black, Roger turned to see Mary Cross asking him how he knew about her. Gavin smiled since he knew. I know her, in fact. A few days ago I had noticed that you were looking for something. I suspected it was this, but I didn't dare tell them, she explained. I also know her. Where I come from, I had read a book about Aztec Zahotacal culture who lived millions of years ago in empires, where they mentioned her. It talks about ruin and devastation, said Lewis. So are we. Angelica and Mariah added. What do you know? Black asked. I think, and I know Mariah will agree with me, that the people who wrote that rune may have been part of the group of young people who killed the witch last time, said Angelica. It would make sense, Lewis added. And what are the orbs for? Asked Mariah. We need to collect the 10 orbs by next year, otherwise we won't be able to advance in the school. Before they do. The Scarlet Eagles. It is written in the prophecy. The witch controls that house. In addition, we thought that the orbs were new tools in our time, since no book, scroll, rune or writings that we have read and researched mentioned anything about the orbs. But if these 3 people who this message says knew about that, it means that they had found them to advance on their path and then placed them at different points. As you see, the message indicates where the blue orb is, explained Black. Do you think it's a trap? We should go to Death Mountain. Roger insisted again with the traps. Do you think that the heroes of that time could have been students of the Jade Clovers? Lewis asked. Yes, I was wondering. The same thing. No one else uses our prosperity motto apart from us, said Angelica. No, I correct you. My grandmother told me that there were several boys from different houses, cultures, ages and parts of the world who joined forces to finish with her. Gavin interrupted. And do you 5 have allies from other houses? Angelica asked. At the moment only we are in this search. I am very sorry for not having told you at the beginning. But we are not trusting just anyone. There could be people in other houses with bad intentions, or who have allies in the Scarlet Eagles, for example. At the moment, our house is the only one fighting against the prophecy, said Adrian. Let's not waste any more time, then we'll chat. Let's go out from here and we go through the blue orb to Death Mountain, Black concluded. The boys played the lamp, returned to normal and returned to the room. That afternoon Adrian, Gavin, Roger, Alvord and Black returned to Asgard Ranch, to place the green orb on the tray with the other orbs that they already possessed. They had 6 orbs in their possession, the yellow, purple, black, silver, white and green orbs. They had 4 left, and now the next mission was the blue orb. In the meeting room, Daniel Black had a plan for the group. I've come up with a new plan for the blue orb, Black added, raising his hand. What do you have in mind? Adrian asked. I was thinking about telling Lewis, Mary Cross, Mariah and Angelica about sending them to the Death Mountain in search of the blue orb, and they brought her with us, said Black. Do you think they would listen to us? Asked Gavin. If we propose it to them as a test to be part of the group, I know they will. In the tree, they seemed motivated to be part of the search for the prophecy, said Roger, and Black concluded by saying, I agree with Roger. Tomorrow in the living room I will present the idea to you. So Daniel Black, the next day, immediately went in search of the girls and Lewis to propose to them the idea of joining the group, if they passed the test on the frozen route to reach Death Mountain.